So the first question that we have is,
Mhm.
could you please introduce yourself and your specific area of interest, what
Sure.
you work on?
So I am Gunjan Veda. I am Director of Collaborative Research, Policy and Practice with the Movement for Community-Led Development, which is really a global consortium of over 1,500 local civil society organizations and 70 INGOs from around the world who are committed to putting communities front and center in development. So in my role, what we do is we very firmly in the movement believe in data for the people, right? So if people have to lead their own development, they also need the data to know how they are doing and what they're learning and how to improve things. And that's kind of the focus within the movement and the work that we do. We try to look at, well, what is the impact of community-led development? But we also try to see how can we actually ensure that data is not from people, which is what it has typically been in evaluation, where we extract data for people to answer our questions, to put into our reports, and to kind of feed our databases, never giving it back, to moving it to data which is for people. And so people decide how they would look at and measure the impact of a project, what would be most useful for them, and they have access to that information. So my specific area of interest really is around these areas of data for the people, of decolonizing monitoring and evaluation and how it's been happening, right? And of ensuring that evaluation is transformed such that it is not moving from one set of experts to another set of experts, but recognizing the value and the capacities that communities and people have for MEL and bringing that into the process.
So the theme for this year's European Evaluators Society conference is actions and shifting paradigms for challenging times. Um, Basically, the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted the evaluators and the evaluation way of working and thinking.
Mhm.
What would you say were the biggest challenges you faced as an evaluator over the past few years?
So, like I said, I work with a global consortium, right? And so I work with a team of evaluators from all around the world, from different organizations of all sizes. And when the pandemic hit, evaluation has been such a parachute experts in kind of a field, right? So when the pandemic hit, everybody was in this position, oh my God, what do we do? How do we carry on this work of evaluation? Because now we are parachuting out those experts, we can't parachute them in, right? And the other part of it was also, but even with organizations that worked with communities, right? Especially to get data and stuff, it was like, well, but how do we do that? Because those communities were never seen as evaluators themselves or being capable of doing evaluation. In other words, because we never trusted communities to be a part of the monitoring and evaluation process, and we never trusted the local, uh, the local the local development sector professionals, right, to be evaluators, we were stuck. We were in a position as a field, I would say, and I saw this across a number of our members, wherein M&E came to a halt. So that was one huge challenge of, suddenly, I think this recognition and realization how dependent we were on just parachuting in externals. But I think the second huge challenge which I personally faced was that a lot of my work is around generating evidence on the practice of CLD, right? What do we know is the impact of CLD? What happens when communities are mobilized and take charge of their own development? And the pandemic presented this fantastic opportunity to do so because you actually saw the difference. And yet we did not have systems in place to capture that impact and to capture what is happening in these communities, that process, the human process of change. I think that was a huge challenge for me personally.
So then how do you envision this shifting approach in evaluation? Do you think it's exciting? Uh, what are your thoughts on the shifting paradigm?
I think it's super exciting. I mean, when we started the movement 5 years in 2015, we were launched the same day that the Sustainable Development Goals were announced, and we were shouting from the rooftops You need to believe in communities. You need to shift power to communities. And nobody was listening to us. And suddenly we are at this time where everybody is constantly coming to us and saying, the pandemic basically showed people that communities are the first responders in any crisis, right? And so now everybody wanted to find ways of, well, then how do we work with communities? How do we really do community-led development or locally led development or localization, right? All of these things. How do we do this? And what is our role in it as monitoring and evaluation professionals, right? How do we ensure if communities have to lead their development, they need the data? How do we ensure they get the data? How do we ensure that we are collecting data that they think is important, right? And that they value. So it's an extremely exciting time because we are seeing the vision that we wanted for the sector. We are suddenly seeing a growing intention or a recognition around this. I mean, I'm currently doing a mural on decolonizing evaluation, and it's fascinating to see how many people from all over the world are putting in commitments into it. They're all coming up with commitments. So it's absolutely an interesting and exciting time. I think the huge challenge is that the intent is beginning to come in. But what I keep hearing, just the other day, I got an email from, a funding organization saying, we would really like to do this. We just don't know what it means for us and how we should do it. So I think it's an exciting time. It's a window of opportunity, but we really need to ensure that we are walking the talk and not just talking at this point in time.
What would be a little then nugget of advice that you would offer to those seeking to apply these new ideas and this community-led development?
So I think I would say the huge thing when you hear decolonizing, conversations around decolonizing or around localization or locally led and community-led development, the thing that I keep hearing from everyone is, yes, we should do it. There are very few people who turn around and say today, you shouldn't do it. It's all like, but we can't because the funders don't allow it, or because the RFPs don't allow it, or because the organizations are structured in such a way, and all of these excuses. I think what the fundamental thing for the shift to happen, it can only happen if each one of us realizes that, yes, it's true we all operate in a system, and there are pieces in it which are, roadblocks, but at the end of the day, we have all been part of this system. We have all colluded in making it the way it is. And so that change, if we really want it to happen, has to happen with each one of us. So we have to recognize what is it that we are doing, which is preventing the shift. We have to look inwards and see, are we ready to acknowledge and believe that people who don't speak as many languages as we do, who don't have those university degrees, who have not traveled as extensively as us, still know what they want and are capable of taking charge of their development, are capable of telling us exactly how that success would look like for them. So that change has to begin with us. And I would say my one piece of advice is that let's begin not just by pointing out what needs to change in the system, because that's very easy to do, but by looking and seeing what do we need to change within the way we work, we operate, we think for this change to happen.
So then if you could briefly explain what attendants to your professional development workshop can expect from your session, that would be fantastic, actually, like a small preview.
Absolutely. So one of our fundamental principles is that if we have to transform evaluation, we have to change the way we think about evaluation. Evaluation as it currently stands has become a tool of judgment, of assessing how certain people and systems are doing, right? We have to move from that and take evaluation, monitoring and evaluation back to the learning roots. It has to be an instrument for learning and growth. So what our session does, or what our professional development workshop does, is it looks at, and like I said, there is this growing intention around the world of, yes, we want to do locally led or community led development, but we don't know how. And we absolutely don't know how it would integrate into the practice of evaluation. So this session it's a 3-part session. It's designed to create a common understanding of what CLD, community-led development, looks like in practice. So we are going to share a tool which is currently being used by organizations all over the world, from USAID to, small local civil society organizations and governments, on, it's a learning tool on how do you practice community-led development, right? And we believe that this tool should be an integral part of an evaluator's toolkit. So we're going to introduce the tool, we're going to do simulations on the tool, and then we're going to look very specifically at what does monitoring and evaluation look like for CLD and LLD projects? How is it different? And how do you take an existing evaluation and really redesign and reimagine it such that it can become community-led? That's going to be very interactive. It's not us lecturing or telling people, it's all of us pooling together our knowledge and resources to move towards this end.
That sounds really, really interesting. Are there any other topics, just out of curiosity, of the conference that have sort of captured your attention or sparked your interest? Have you had a chance to look at the program in any case?
Well, I have looked at the program and I'm particularly interested. I saw a few sessions which are exploring deeper other paradigms of evaluation. For instance, there's one around decolonizing, there's one around Africa. I'm very interested to see if we have speakers coming and speaking about the Made in Africa evaluation paradigm, which is so different, which focuses on the relational, which we completely don't have in the normal qualitative, quantitative frames that we apply from the West. So I'm very interested in looking at that. I'm also very interested in looking at some of the pandemic responses in evaluation, to just see globally how organizations have come up with methods, and to see how many of those methods actually involve centering people and communities.
Fantastic. My last few questions are a little bit about specifically youth and evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
So, what role do you see for young and emerging evaluators in now that the pandemic has passed and we are sort of thinking also more micro than macro? So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think firstly, it is the time to be in the field of evaluation. As a young evaluator, you are entering the field at just amazing time, because it's a time when the field is changing, when we're really beginning to reimagine and transform the way we work, which means there is tremendous opportunity as evaluators to bring in your creativity and your perspectives, right? Which really hasn't been how this field has been structured. This field has been a very top-down field. This field has been about conforming to expert frameworks, advice, thinking approaches. This is a time when it allows the field is looking at other perspectives. So it's a fascinating time to actually enter the field. I think for the young evaluators from the majority world, right, who we traditionally call the global south, I like the term majority world, this is the time to begin to explore the different frameworks that have been existing culturally in your countries, and to see how do you integrate them, how do you bring those approaches into the mainstream. And for evaluators from the West and the global North, this is the time to really engage and listen, and to see how do we create new paradigms which move away from our colonial roots and really create more equitable systems and transform evaluation.
Finally, what is one piece of advice that you would give to young and emerging evaluators in the field?
Listen, be creative, experiment, and most importantly, believe that what you learn in the textbooks is just not all there is to evaluation. Believe that people know what they want, that people have the capacity, the ability, the skills, the resources to lead their development, that they are intelligent human beings, and that if you work with them, then not only will you learn in the process, and you benefit from the process. You will learn and benefit from the process as much as they will. So go prepared into the field to learn, not just from experts, but from communities, from people, and from the non-traditional paradigms and perspectives.